Let's talk about Graham Linehan. Some good news for once. Around 7 weeks after he was arrested, after 5 armed police officers turned up to greet him at Heathrow Airport to arrest him for some tweets, the Met Police have finally said they're not going to take any action against him. And further to that, they're also going to stop investigating non-crime hate incidents. Now, non-crime hate incident is a funny thing. It's quite hard to explain what it is. It's sort of a policing tool that allows them to record things. It might be speech, might be behaviour that doesn't meet the criminal threshold, but is perceived by someone. Doesn't even have to be a victim, but perceived by someone, whoever is doing the reporting to the police, as hateful in some way. Andrew, first of all, what's your reaction to this? I mean, it is good to see the police lay off a little bit on the speech policing for once.
Yeah, I mean, this is finally justice done for, and it's great to see. And, it's that classic thing where, you might not agree with what somebody says, but you'll fight to the death for their right to say it. And I think we're in that space where that saying needs to be kind of have a raging comeback in 2025. And actually, I think he'd be hard pressed to take a huge offence at what he said in those tweets anyway. Even if you were, offence driven, this is pretty banal stuff. If we're honest, there's plenty of worse stuff that's said on the internet than what Graeme said. So when it comes to the sort of the non-crime hate incidents, it's such a new Labourism, and it's an attempt to try and make everyone see the world the way they do. And it goes back to what you were just saying about Jess Phillips and how she sees the world. And I think when you're from a position perhaps of a more libertarian nature, these things are completely alien to you. If you're from a sort of hard socialist kind of position, they make an enormous amount of sense because you're helping shape and mold society. And that's kind of how sort of that left-wing progressive element works. But it's just antithetical to anyone who believes in freedom of speech or the ability to carry out your life without too much state interference.
The police, their excuse is that they're necessary to sort of detect when hatefulness or racism or whatever might be bubbling up in an area. So they record these non-crime hate incidents, and that should give them police intelligence. I mean, I've seen absolutely no evidence that is how they work or that is effective. Presumably they wouldn't have predicted last year's anti-migrant riots, for instance. That,
especially if you look at some of the examples. I mean, they're risible. The schoolgirl who said one of classmates smelled like fish, that was a non-crime hate. Were they terrified that was going to turn into some kind of pogrom against people who smell like fish if they hadn't, recorded that dutifully? The guy who was whistling Bob the Builder was recorded as a non-crime hate incident. I think his neighbour was Polish. Was it a Polish builder joke? Who the hell knows? But these are not kind of serious indications of unrest. And the other thing is that, of course, the police are going to collect intelligence and all kinds of things, but it went further than that. It was a way in which people were kind of quasi-criminalised for what they said, because yes, you wouldn't be arrested or prosecuted for a non-crime hate incident. The clue is in the name, non-crime. But at the same time, it would go down on your record. If you applied for a job which required an enhanced DBS check, it could flag up. And if you're trying to be a school teacher or something, where you, in the public sector or what have you, there's very likely that could deprive you of a job. It was also very clear that they'd been kind of weaponized by people with an axe to grind all the time. There was a non-crime hate incident recorded against Amber Rudd, the former Home Secretary, over a speech she gave about immigration. Because I think it was an Oxford academic reported her for that. And he later admitted that he hadn't actually heard the speech himself. He just didn't like the sound of it from the media coverage. So it's been a farce from start to finish. And I worry that the farce is going to continue because the Met have said that they're not going to investigate them.
Yeah.
They're going to continue to record them, however, and they still haven't clarified that, for instance, they're not going to feed that information through to DBS, people who do DBS checks. So it's one of those things where I think that they wanted to kind of make a kind of statement, particularly because the Graham Linehan arrest was so heavy-handed. 5 armed police officers. He was held in a cell for hours upon hours. And that really kind of shocked not just people in Britain, but around the world. So I guess they wanted to do something to kind of save face.
Yeah.
Didn't relate to his particular offence, because obviously that was actually criminal, or supposedly. But they
downgraded it. So what happened was they decided it wasn't criminal. Then they downgraded it to a non-crime hate incident, and then now they've made this announcement.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where the story of the non-crime hate incident is it continuing to limp on even when there have been attempts to get rid of it. And I think that's the part of the problem is a reminder that the problem is with the culture within the police and the kind of quite anti-free speech and also just very peculiar sort of notions they picked up over the past 20 years. Until that's tackled, you're going to get, even if they get rid of NCHRs and call them something else,
yeah,
you'll get something like it.
And we'll still, of course, have all of the laws that do literally criminalise
of course,
speech, from the Communications Act to the Malicious Communications Act, to the Online Safety Act, to the Public Order Act, that I'm sure people have heard us talk about many times before. I mean, you're absolutely right, Tom, to say that, this is not the first time the death of the non-crime hate incident has been declared. Now, these were, it's bizarre actually, because they didn't come from Parliament. No actual elected person has ever said that these things need to exist. They're inspired by the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, and then basically put into guidance by the College of Policing in 2014 or 2015. And there have been several court cases where judges have said this is not lawful to record these things. There have been multiple Home Secretaries that have said the police need to stop recording non-crime hate incidents. They've, Priti Patel in 2021, I think it was, said that all non-crime hate incidents should be expunged from the record. Didn't happen. The police did not ignore, they ignored the orders of Home Secretaries, the Court of Appeal, the High Court, and yet it carries on as a sort of law unto itself. As you say, Tom, because this is the culture in policing where they believe it is their actual solemn, sacred duty almost to tell us what we can and can't think. Andrew, what do you make of that aspect of it, where it's just the police have just completely lost the plot and have been completely captured by woke?
Well, look, I think the College of Policing have an awful lot to answer for. I think if you went up to any random police officer on the street and asked them how they felt about this, and they could answer you with no comebacks, they would tell you it's nonsense and they didn't join the job to go and police this stuff, and they want to go out and catch criminals. I think at the kind of beat level that this is nothing that anyone wants to do, be it the person on the wrong end of it or the cop who is told to go and deal with it. But the College of Policing is certainly, I think, institutionally captured. An awful lot of the nonsense that comes out stems from that organisation. And really that's the bit that I think needs looking at. And when it comes to, recording this stuff, capturing this stuff, it's a really great example, I think, of how well-meaning, very broad decisions can be exposed and be exploited by malign actors. Because I know for the Linehan case, the way they phrased the complaint was very careful. They had lawyers involved when they submitted the complaint to the police. It's not like somebody saw it online and was immediately like, 999, I've been upset. There was a very cynical kind of correct language to trigger all the buttons in the process to make sure the police could then, if they didn't investigate, the police could then be investigated themselves. So that it's very cleverly weaponized by these people. And that's the problem when you don't have legislation underpinning it, I think, because you can go to court, you can have the judge look at what Parliament intended when the original legislation was written, and the judge can then make a decision as to what politicians actually meant and therefore what this means. But when you go through this kind of, here's a decision we've made internally, now do what you want, then it's so broad and so, you can drive a bus through it when it comes to exploiting it and weaponizing it for malign reasons. So, we go back to that Tony Blair piece of taking away parliamentary sovereignty. I think if we could just return to, and stop all these independent bodies and things making these decisions and just return to legislation, where a political party is elected to do something, they make the law and then the police enforce the law, then that would simplify and avoid a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And we should probably say before we move on that we are about to release our documentary all about this topic. So think before you post, look out for it on Monday at 8 p.m. We've got interviewed a series of these supposed speech criminals just to kind of wrap our heads around the experience of going through that process of getting the proverbial knock at the door, but also how the hell we got into this situation where 30 arrests a day now, or what made under communications offences for saying offensive things on the internet. So yeah, look out for that on Monday night.